Pratt and my wonderful co-host who I kind of skipped out last week. So I want to say hello to everybody. And we have Calibri, and you're watching Get Down and Dirty Talking Art on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest TV
station
in the world. So I want everybody to please comment, share, and like. More comments, talking, and everything. So, oh wait, she's got her.
Excuse us.
Wait a minute, sorry, we're having a little technical difficulties.
We're not having a technical. Calibri is fumbling.
Calibri is fumbling with the thing. We have our wonderful guest, Ron, from Massachusetts. So we wanted to say hello. Okay.
I was trying to do a watch party. I'm just put it on pause. Y'all know we're watching.
Yeah, all right.
Sorry.
So,
hi.
Yeah, we're here.
There we go.
Here, we have Ron. Hi, Ron.
How you doing?
A little bit of Astrobia going on here today.
Salut.
Salute.
Mr. Ron Fortier.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for asking me.
It's a pleasure. It's a complete honor. I love your work.
I do too. And your story behind your work and your Calibri was telling me some of the stuff. It sounds so interesting. And he was in Detroit and he didn't even come visit us. Wasn't it a couple weeks?
He's coming back.
Are you coming back?
Yeah. Last when we were there in June, Henry Hopper graciously, I mean, he's a businessman. He has a business to run. It was supposed to be like an hour. He took, it was like a 7-hour tour.
Yeah. I know.
In his van, the Minnow.
Oh,
it was a 7-hour tour,
Thank you.
And we went everywhere. It was really a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
So you got to see the sights from the site man, Mr. Antique Man. Really.
Yeah.
That was the one to take you on the tour.
Yeah, the 1-hour tour. It's like the boat ride. What was it? The show that was the 1-hour tour and they're on the island.
That was Gilligan's Island. That's what I meant. The Minnow was the name of that. That boat. But it was supposed to be just an hour, and it took around 7 hours. And we saw, all the famous dead people houses, all the famous dead people graves. we had breakfast, and it was great because it was Monday in Detroit, and I found out that not a lot happens on Monday in Detroit. I love Detroit because it's such a big, small city.
It is. It is very amazing. It's just the history is amazing.
Yeah. All of the different neighborhoods and different feelings.
Oh God, yeah. And then you got your suburbs, but it's kind of like, so you're from Massachusetts?
Yes, I was born across the river. I'm sitting here in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, which was the service part of the harbor of New Bedford Harbor. New Bedford Harbor is still one of the finest service harbors in the United States.
Now, what does a service harbor mean?
A service harbor is a place where you can come in with your yacht or your stinky fishing boat.
Okay.
And get it completely done over. I mean, everything you need is here. It's all because of the whaling industry here. At one time, this is the richest city in the world per capita.
Wow.
Until Mr. Drake discovered oil in Titusville, Pennsylvania, and kind of put the kibosh on the whole thing.
Interesting.
I was going to say, you're rich.
Yeah. It's like a form of art, redoing the art, redoing the yachts. That's like that would be like another form of art.
Oh, we had what the heck is his name? I mean, it's a mega yacht. Giffen from Pixar. That's the group that broke away or that created the new Disney thing that did all the Pixar stuff.
Oh yeah.
His mega yacht was out there. I mean, and then of course we've got the Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard just.
Oh yeah.
A couple of stone skips away.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a pretty cool place. And history wise, it's got a phenomenal history. This is the place where Frederick Douglass came to freedom. This was the second most important abolitionist center in the United States.
Wow.
The history just goes on and on and on and on.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Well, I'm glad that you pointed that out because we'll roll into your artwork. Yeah. You're kind of known, or at least the work that I'm most familiar with, is your storytelling. You tell a lot of stories in history that either are forgotten in society or aren't highlighted in the way that you capture them.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about your work?
Well, I began my practice as a painter has been for decades as an abstractionist, and I prided myself in painting with no emotions because it was just an intellectual exercise. I spoke with James Dozier about this on Monday during the DFABC, the Detroit Fine Arts Breakfast Club. And then because of an event that was about 2 years ago, it was a holiday fair. I brought a bunch of my old work to this fair because I wanted to sell it. And I figured people would be looking for bargains for Christmas, and they'd want to be able to say, this is an original piece of artwork, and people probably would think that they spent more money than they actually did. And I just really wanted to get rid of it because, I mean, there are pieces of work that, just get pushed around and sometimes forgotten for storage. So anyway, amongst all the pieces was a painting that I had done back in the 80s of the New Bedford Arctic whaling disaster of 1871. My dad was a janitorial contractor. One of his accounts was the Charles S. Ashley Insurance Company, and they were the underwriters for the expedition. And they had these absolutely gorgeous lithographs, on the wall, framed on the wall, and they always intrigued me. And when I was at in graduate school at the University of Miami, I was getting a little homesick. We had in February of 75, I think it was, we had what they call the gas explosions. It was a extremely cold winter. It shifted the gas pipes underground. They lit off, and they nearly took out the entire historic district. In fact, my dad was almost killed. He was blown out of the building.
Oh, wow.
But back then there was no internet, and so I did whatever research I could from the library, and I was going to do a more realistic, a more objective kind of work. But my thesis advisor said, no, you came in here on your abstract work, you're leaving here on your abstract work.
Wow.
So yeah, so I maintained the theme, but abstractly. It was called Fire and Ice, and
I've seen that.
Yeah.
Shortly after graduation, I started messing around, going back to that again before my advertising agency got going full tilt. And anyway, so the painting had been sitting around for a while, and at this holiday show, people just kept coming up to it right away. I mean, they knew exactly what the painting was about, which totally amazed me. But their frame of reference was, oh, Shackleton, Ernest Shackleton. I said, no. But funny you should mention that, because I read his book, because that was the only reference I had, about this event. Imagine being on a ship. You're stuck in the ice. You can't move, and the ice is crushing the ship slowly. So you're wondering, when am I going to have to get off of this thing? And when I do, what's going to happen next? And the Inuit
harbor over there. I'm sorry. I'm not familiar with
this. This is off the coast of Alaska, where this happened.
Okay.
1871. There were 33 vessels. 22 of them were from New Bedford, and 22 of them were crushed by the ice or burned.
Oh my God.
And the fires were accidental because they have tripods on the decks of these whaling vessels that would hold these massive these tripods that were huge cauldrons that were sitting on masonry stoves, and they would throw scraps in there and fire it up, and they would melt all the whale blubber to make the whale oil and put them into the casks, into the barrels.
Didn't know that. That's interesting.
So at that time, by 71, there were also half sail, half steam. And then the Inuit, the indigenous people of that area, just want to get these people the heck out of their land, off their land, or out of their area. So anyway, a gentleman came up to me very, very secretively and said, how much? And I was kind of stunned. He says, don't look around, don't turn around. I'm buying this for my wife for a Christmas present because she saw it, she loves it. and how much, and I'll come by later, and so anyway, so I did, and I got Paula, my wife Paula, who's Paula Batchelor, who's a Detroit native, born and bred, and a friend of mine. They just started discussing me and my artwork, and it was kind of interesting. And I know she doesn't like me to talk about her, but it was because of her that she said, you're a natural born storyteller, and you've been doing all this abstract work, and it's fine and everything like that, but you really got the knack for this. I mean, that particular painting, So anyway, I went back to that theme, and as I got into it, by the second painting, I don't know where I heard of it. Some people say I was way ahead of the curve by hearing about Greenwood, the Tulsa Massacre.
Mm-hmm.
And that really ticked me off because it reminded me of Guernica. My friend's wife is Spanish. Her dad was in the Spanish Civil War. There was a deal between Generalissimo Franco, the dictator of Spain, and the Luftwaffe to use Guernica as a target practice, a town for target practice. You imagine that? Live fire. And they bombed this little town. And I thought to myself, my God, this is like insane. That happens in other countries.
Mm-hmm.
But not really, right?
No.
Oh, yeah.
Because this happened before Guernica. So I decided I was going to go do that. And it was very difficult. It was very, very difficult because I couldn't imagine what my great grandson, whose dad is Black, and our daughter Maddie, I could imagine a world of them getting to adulthood and nothing's changed.
Right.
Nothing's changed. So I went into that series. What was that?
That why you document these types of events to show people history?
Yeah, it's a risky kind of a thing, but one of the things that Paula would tell me was like, you're a good abstract painter, but you always seem miserable. Because to me, it was like a science experiment. It's all about composition, moving this around, moving that around. And that was it. I mean, there was no other emotion in there. It was all intellectual.
Mm-hmm.
But when I started doing this, as horrible as the subject matter was, I just felt alive. I just felt like, there's like this enormous amount of weight being lifted off my shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as I moved on, I heard Paula's sister, Karen. Hey, Karen, I hope you're watching.
Hi, Karen.
She was the first Black woman admitted into the Daughters of the American Revolution, which was quite a feat back then. This is before computers. I mean, she did genealogy the hard way, the old way.
Hey. All right, Karen.
And the weird thing is, I knew about Karen before I ever knew Paula, because I saw Karen on Good Morning America when I was at the University of Miami with Bryant Gumbel, and for some wacko reason, I never forgot that. So there's a lot of things that we just can't quite wrap our heads around. They just happen, right? Yeah. So I heard her on a podcast, and she was talking about her second great grandmother, Charity Ann.
Hey, hold on a minute. We have to take a real fast break.
Okay, sure. I want to let everybody know, remind our viewers that you're tuning in to Get Down and Dirty Talking Art on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world, with Calibri the Artist and Debbie LaPratt. Make sure you watch us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Twitch. If you're just tuning in, we are here with our fabulous guest, Mr. Ron Fortier, artist, historian. He's telling us all about I'm just fascinated with the amount of research and knowledge that you have behind your pieces. But for our viewers, if you have any questions, you can't call in today, but you can hit us in the chat.
Please hit us in the chat. Yes. And please comment
if you have any questions and comments for Ron.
Yes,
please. But please continue. Good morning, America.
Well, I mean, I heard Karen on this podcast, and she was talking about how the story was passed down through the family. Mm-hmm. About the third great grandmother. They have no idea what she looked like. They had no idea what her name is. Okay. But what was passed down was that this white man, came to the breeding plantation where she was enslaved. Mm-hmm. His name was Reverend Isaiah Parker. He was driving a wagon pulled by 2 black horses. Those are all details.
Okay.
Wow.
2 of the little girls were sold away from this unknown third great grandmother. Only one of them had a name that passed down, was Charity Ann. She's the one that brought the story down through the family. The other little girl was sold off somewhere along the line between Virginia and moving north to south to Georgia. And Charity Ann was given to the Reverend Parker's son as a gift. There's more to the story, and that's where the Parker line comes from. And you know a couple of the Parkers, Linda and Amy Parker. That's where that line comes from. But I just as a parent, and then what was passed down as well was the words, because we don't know if she ran after the wagon, if she was even allowed, if she was held down, if she was screaming it, if she was whispering it. But the words were, "Bye bye, my babies. I'll see you in the by and by."
Oh my God.
So if she couldn't see them in this lifetime, she would see them in heaven. And it was passed all the way, down, which was, it's a really difficult thing. I mean, one of the things is, we're talking about, what people are calling the revision of history. You can't revise history that was never written correctly, number one. Okay. But people don't realize that there were plantations after, I think it was somewhere after when they abolished slavery at the beginning of, it was around 1810, I think it was 1812. They didn't abolish slavery, they abolished the importation of Africans. So now they have to do what they call the natural increase, where, okay, well, if we can't bring them in from Africa, we got to make more. And there were more people added in a variety of manners, which is another story on top of that. So, in the meantime, and my mother was a great storyteller, because her dad was a storyteller. He told a lot of stories except for the story of his own life, because he was what they refer to as a crypto Jew, or Marano, which is a derogatory term. He was from the section of
that?
What's that?
What is that?
A Marano is a pig. It's a bad term. That's what they would call the Jews or the conversos, the Jews that converted into Catholicism.
Oh, okay.
Which some of those conversions were nudge nudge, wink wink. I mean, they did what they could to continue their Judaism undercover, and it was a pretty horrible, another horrible thing that what people do to each other. But he was a storyteller. He told a lot of stories to my mother. My mother passed down a lot of stories to me. And being an abstract painter, I right away, it's like, oh, he can draw. Yes, I can draw. But one of the things was when I was doing this more realistic kind of work was, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? How am I going to present it? So I decided right away, it's not going to be historically accurate. It's not going to be about what's the term? It's going to be more about psychological reality or emotional reality, more so than
just document.
Yeah, more so than factual documentation. Yeah. Okay, so I mean the story is factual, but we're not. What did the wagon look like?
And
those kinds of things.
It plays a role heavy in your work.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask how you actually get in the psyche, because what I noticed about your depiction, as opposed to any other historic depictions of any other type of moment in history, is yours. Like, for instance, with the fire and ice, it is and I hate to say it this way, but it's like you can almost see people jumping off the boat.
Yeah.
You know, you can see the chaos. It's like you capture that moment from an emotional perspective, even without always showing people. You know, you have the Tulsa, you know, and you have the flames and you show, but it puts you in that day as opposed to just, oh, this is what happened.
Right.
You know, it puts you right there in the moment, as if you had a camera, as if there was somebody right there capturing it.
Well, the positive feedback that I've received was really, and I spoke to you about this before, Calibri. People are like, oh my God, they're like sets from movies. I mean, and I said, it's funny you should mention that they look like sets, because that's how I really started off. When I was in high school, my senior English teacher found out I had some talent or whatever, and asked me to design the sets for Oliver, for the musical Oliver.
So cool.
So I did, and he showed my designs to a husband and wife who ran the opera department at what was then Southeastern Massachusetts University, or SMU. And we always had a heck of a time with that, because it was, no, we're not Southern Methodist. It's a very nice school, but it's Southeastern Massachusetts University. It is now Dartmouth, University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. Anyway, he showed them the designs, and they were very, very pleased. This would he like to work for us? Now, I hadn't even graduated yet. So I started working on Die Fledermaus, Così fan tutte, La Bohème. I started designing these sets. Amal and the Night Visitor. And it was really cool. So I continued working for them through my undergraduate years for my BFA. Went off to the University of Miami, came back, and I got to work for a gentleman that I heard growing up in New York City, because my grand uncle was insatiable for culture. He's the guy that I keep pointing to that was responsible for me being an artist. My earliest recollections of being taken to every gallery, museum. I mean, he was like at a gallery or a museum or something every single day. And then on the weekends, I can't remember now if it was Saturday or Sunday, he would listen to the Voice of the Metropolitan, and I can still see him. It's like a movie set in my head. He's got the strobe in the bathroom, and he's, running his straight razor over the strobe, and he's lathering up his face, and you could hear Boris Goldovsky on the radio, and Uncle Louis shaving. And when I worked for Maestro Goldovsky, I told him this story, and he looked at me and he said, "Now that you've met me, are you disappointed?" He was a wonderful man. Because of working for him, I was in constant contact with Sarah Caldwell of Boston Opera, and she was not the opera lady I expected. This is a lady you could have shots and beers with. She was really, really cool. Well, at that time, we had suspected that my now ex-wife may be pregnant. And this was before cell phones and so on and so forth. So I was working on sets in the pit. I had this gentleman come up to me. His name was Aloysius Petrocelli. He worked for one of the production companies. And he said, "Hey, I showed your stuff to Boston Ballet, Sarah Caldwell and I. And they want you to be the lead set designer for the Boston Ballet."
On your right away.
Right. And it was like, oh my God. And they said, "Oh, and by the way, you have to completely do over the Nutcracker, and that's got to be done first."
Really?
And I was like kind of thunderstruck by it. And he said, "Well, but the bad part is you got to be on the road 50 weeks out of the year." So unbeknownst to him, I had just received a phone call from my ex-wife telling me that she was indeed pregnant. So I had to turn down that job because I couldn't. Not my first child.
Yeah.
Not my first child. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And to this day, my daughter Jen, when she sees the commercials for the Boston Ballet for the Nutcracker, she's like, "I'm so sorry, Dad." It's no, it was well worth it because it was a very complicated birth. It had nothing to do with her, but it was with Mom. And if I hadn't have been there, I don't know what I would have done. But it's funny.
Do you find that the music at all influences the work? Because now that you're mentioning it, when I do look at your paintings, let alone just set design, but they do, it does feel like opera. It's almost like you can hear.
Right.
You know.
Well, with Charity Ann specifically, I wanted to put myself in her skin if that's possible. I wanted to know what she smelled. I wanted to know what atmospheric pressure she felt. I wanted to know if there were bugs, mosquitoes, or gnats or something around her. I wanted to know, could she feel the sun on her body? What time of day was it?
That is so.
I wanted to know these things because it was really super important to put myself in that point.
Mm-hmm.
What did she smell? What did she hear? Could she even function? Could she even notice what was going on? Was she in a tunnel? Because after all, they're taking away her kids, and we don't know how many other children she had. Mm-hmm. We don't know if they did that again and again to her. And
emotion that you're feeling.
Yeah, and then two frightened little girls. God only knows what happened to the.
You can't protect them.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, and you are absolutely stuck. It's like Sophie's Choice, where she has to suffocate the baby, or else everybody goes. So, this thing of people being between a rock and a hard place in a dilemma kind of intrigues me. Not because I'm a pain jockey, but it's just totally the opposite. As a kid, I could not watch the entire Jerry Lewis movies because he would always get to that point in the movies where his behavior was really embarrassingly outrageous. Mm-hmm. And I felt so much shame for him that hurt. I could feel physical pain, like somebody was sticking needles in me.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I can't explain it. I'm just, just the way I am. And there's several books that I've, Moby Dick, I've only read through it once because I was forced to in high school. And chapter 87, The Grand Armada, it's called, where they're looking down and they're watching all these whales, the cows, nursing their calves. And the killing's going to stop pretty soon.
Yeah.
So in fact, I just put in a grant to do a couple of very large pieces. And I want to use that as an analogy for race relations in this country. Mm-hmm. Because it's a them and an us. It's my world and your world. And they're looking through this glass of water and they're seeing these whales, these mothers nursing their calves, and they're not doing anything unusual or unnatural. And then all of a sudden, these men are on these ships, and some of them are forced into this situation where they have to go after these animals and start killing them. And it's not a pretty thing, So for some reason, that kind of thing, it doesn't delight me. It doesn't thrill me, but
it's a duty.
Yeah.
The Buddha said there are three things that can never be hidden, and it's the sun, the moon, and the truth.
That's powerful.
That's powerful. So that's what I'm doing.
Hold that thought. You're watching Get Down and Dirty Talking Art. Whew, heavy stuff, y'all.
Yeah, it's really
stuff
heavy.
about today. Thank you for tuning in on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. Tonight we have our guest, Mr. Ron Fortier. He's talking about documenting history,
storyteller and artist.
Yes,
and that's what art is the story.
Yes, really igniting just the fire inside of you. You have to look at his work. It just get a reaction. Might make you want to cry, honestly.
Yeah, that's
what I'm fortunate that you are doing your due diligence to tell the stories and to tell them properly and not just for profit. So I think that's really cool. All righty. You guys, if you have any comments or questions, please go in the chat too.
Yes. And share. Please comment and share.
Yes. Now, could you tell us a bit about your your background, how you became to, because I know you said you started abstract painting, and before that you got into theater.
Right.
But I know you'd had a pretty rich cultural upbringing.
Well, yeah, my mother and father um, met around 1950. He lost his mother when she was 3 to tuberculosis. Um, and he and his 2 brothers were left up in Canada because my grandfather, his father, was up there on vacation with my grandmother, Marianne, and she became very, very ill, and he had to come back south to take care of her. And they basically said, just take her home. She's going to die anyway. So one of the aunts took care of her, the old-fashioned way, how women, were the caretakers and the healers and such. And he stayed in Canada. He was a lumberjack, and I have this photograph of him. I'm actually going to do a painting of him. It's a pivotal moment in his life where he's 19, and at some point around that time, somebody came up from the States and said, "Hey, Roland, you better get your butt down to the United States and register for the draft." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" I mean, they didn't even have electricity in the farmhouse at that time. And they said, "Well, there's a war on. There's a Korean War." He said, "So what's it got to do with me?" He says, "Well, no, you're an American citizen, and the next time you go, if you decide you're going to go to the United States, or you have to, you're going to be arrested at the border." So he did. That was the least of his problems, I guess, because he met my mom. My mom was born in Yonkers to Portuguese parents. They had met in New Bedford, across the river, and because my grandfather was not Catholic, he was a crypto Jew, a secretive Jew. They got married in City Hall, that was already an unusual thing. They went to Yonkers, where she was born, and as a lot of immigrants did back during the Depression, the little money they had here was a king's fortune in their old country, so they went back, and I guess they thought it was going to be temporarily, and they ended up staying there. My mom came back directly after World War II ended, met and married him, and it didn't work. Back then, the conventional thing is that the Polish married the Polish, the Portuguese married the Portuguese, the French married the French, and if you mixed it up, and anything went wrong, and said, "See, I told you I shouldn't have done that," because those people, and those things, right? So she left with me. I was about 6 months old. Took me to New York, where her uncle, who was a newspaper publisher, who had to leave the city really, really fast. He founded about 6 newspapers in this area. And I'm still trying to figure out, either he was a conniver, a shyster, he was trying to shake down this priest, or he had a news story that he wanted to get out in an honest, forthright way, because this priest was doing things the priests aren't supposed to do. And the full brunt of Catholicism came on top of his back. And so he took off to New York. So anyway, she joined him. And this is the man who took me to all these museums and such.
Wow.
And we lived, oddly enough, and I don't know how he could afford it, but we lived on the east side. My mom doesn't remember the address. We were either in the high 90s or low hundreds, but I know, because I can still see it in my mind's eye, if you walked out of the apartment, right across the street, right into the lobby of Mount Sinai Hospital. So the east gate of Central Park was like my backyard.
Wow.
And it was a really interesting kind of, growing up. I mean, between Madison and Fifth, that's a nice address.
Yeah.
Well, she had a falling out with him. And I tell people it's the reverse Jeffersons. The Jeffersons theme songs were moving on up to the east side. Well, we moved on down to the west side, to Columbus Avenue, to right on the edge of Spanish Harlem. And the reason why she chose that building was because a majority of the people living in it were from the squad of detectives for that precinct. She was no fool. And she was trying to continue her singing career. My mother was a fado singer. Fado is the Portuguese cultural phenomena. It's the Portuguese. Some people liken it to the Portuguese blues. Okay, it's about heartache and pain. It's about stories.
Okay.
You know,
where you get your stories things from, I think.
Exactly. You know, about sailor husbands or boyfriends who go to sea, never come back. You know, the longing, the pining, all that stuff. And she, she also did American standards and everything. And so I lived there till I was about 7. She sent me back to live with my dad while she decided, she was going to move back. And we lived in a one room apartment when she came back. And she continued her singing career here. And she sang from Ludlow, Chicopee, Massachusetts, all the way on down to Newark and Elizabeth, New Jersey.
So did you travel with her?
Yes, I did. And I can still sleep on folding wooden chairs.
Well, that's
I used to make a bed out of it, and all the ladies' coats I would, so it was interesting. And all the things that make me an interesting adult maybe made me a really odd kid. Because I couldn't speak English properly enough. I spoke Spanish because I picked it up living in Spanish Harlem. My mother picked it up very, very, very quickly. I spoke Portuguese. I spoke a smattering of German, a smattering of Italian because of the people that were babysitters for me on the east side. And then so it was and then being a Catholic kid with parents who were separated was also kind of odd.
Yep.
And going to Catholic school didn't make it any easier. So in a way, I was just the odd duck, the oddball, and like I said, it was tough being a kid. But now, those are all gifts. The ability to be multilingual, and so on and so forth. My first recollection of artwork was I created an armada of caravels or caravels. Caravels are the Portuguese sailing ships, the ships that they discover the world with. And I made them out of watermelon rinds and toothpicks and pieces of paper. And I had a whole fleet of them on a windowsill. That's like my first conscious.
How old were you then?
I probably had to be 4 or 5.
Okay. Wow, and to be able to do that at 4 or 5 is really
yeah.
hot.
Yeah, it was interesting. So all these experiences, these exposures to things, all all played into it. I was fortunate to have a good mentor in high school who helped me prepare for my portfolio for college.
Because you mentioned that at 14,
you
got a private art instructor.
Yes, I had a private art instructor. In fact, one of my last podcasts was with his great grandson, Mal Oliveira. He was a phenomenal man.
Very nice.
Phenomenal man. He worked for Pearpoint Glass. Like with Henry would go crazy knowing about Pearpoint Glass because he knows what Pearpoint Glass is. He worked for Hallmark Cards. I mean, he was phenomenal. And then there was one of the instructors at the high school, Francisco Raposa. So I got into what was SMU, which was designed by Paul Rudolph, one of the leading architects in the world. And they designed what was supposed to be the University of the Future in this cow pasture, believe it or not. The compound was as big as Disney World, over 80 acres. While I was there, I was told that I should seek an MFA to teach so that I could survive as a painter. A friend of mine who was a year ahead of me, who was a Cuban refugee and was separated from his parents for about 15, 20 years. Yeah, they've been doing that for a long time. He was in an orphanage. Somehow he reconnected with her, and of all places, why are you going to find a Cuban mother, Miami. So he applied to the University of Miami, got in. The department chair, we used to carry around those slide sets all the time of each other's work and the 35 millimeter slides.
Yep.
The department chair came in. Jerry was the kind of guy who would just come in and he just stopped picking stuff up off your tables like it was just, make himself to home. And he picked up my slides. Lorenzo told me. And he said, whose work is this? He says, oh, it's my friend Ron. He's a year behind me. He's be graduating soon. He says, pick up the phone and tell him to get his ass down here for an interview. That's what Larry said. So I did, and I got a full ride scholarship to the University of Miami, plus an assistantship, work study, and a stipend. So I actually made money going to college, which was kind of interesting.
So you were doing the abstract then, right?
Yes, that's what got me in. I was doing work that was based on my mentor at Southeastern Massachusetts University, Ed Tonieri, who was the developer of acrylic paint for artists. And
mentor.
Yeah, another serendipitous kind of a thing. And so, I lucked out. What can I tell you? But it was, so he introduced me to Alberto Burri, who was an Italian doctor during World War II, who was captured by the Allied troops. When they found out he was a doctor, a surgeon, they pressed him into service. And if you've ever seen Dances with Wolves, the opening of the movie, where they're in that field hospital and it's just a horrible bloody mess of wounded men that cutting off limbs and so on and so forth. Well, this is what Alberto Burri had to go through. He was so traumatized that the psychiatrist told him, you got to find a hobby, because that was like the cure for everything.
Yeah.
And he did, and he started doing these paintings of stitching, and that's what I did. So between him and Antonio Taipis, who was a Spanish painter who did that kind of work as well, that's what got me into the University of Miami. And I stayed as an abstractionist ever since.
Now, have you ever felt discouraged with your practices? Was there any part of your life where you felt, because I know you talked about, I won't say weird, I'll say quirky child. I think a lot of artists are. But I guess what made you push forward?
Yeah.
What made you persevere?
I don't know, because in the back of my head, one of the biggest fears that I had was that what happened to my mother was going to happen to me. My mother had to give up her career in singing, and I know it ripped her soul out. When we came back from New York, she was able to get more gigs, and I've got her press clippings I've been able to find. But when she met my stepfather, who was a wonderful man, and I was lucky as a stepchild, having a wonderful stepmother and a wonderful stepfather, almost like a second set of parents. I mean, I could fall back into that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But because he was a fisherman, and because women who sang father weren't considered nice girls, it just got to be too much, and so she quit. And I know it, as I said, it just sort of ripped her apart. She had to give it up, and she had to give it up. At one point, she had to give it up for me, and another point, she had to give it up for him. And, but, I just persevered, and there were times where I couldn't paint. I ended up, I had 2 advertising agencies. I've worked, stayed alive doing advertising. And here I am.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
So
Thank
cool.
you for persevering. All right, everybody. You're watching Get Down and Dirty Talking Art with Calibri the Artist and Debbie LaPratt. We're here on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world, streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Twitch. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. We're here again tonight with our guest, Mr. Ron Fortier, giving us I'm really enjoying this interview.
We could probably talk another 3 hours with him.
It's a lot of substance. It really is. It's a very rich interview. You have a very rich story. And it comes across in your artwork. So, I'll jump into what's next. You mentioned a couple things that you wanted to.
Probably the most difficult things I've ever done.
Okay.
The Arctic whaling disaster was one thing. It's something that happened to the people in my town. This was the whaling city, all that stuff. And then there's Greenwood, and Greenwood was something that happened, and half of my family is Black, so that touches me. And then there's Charity Ann. It gets a little closer because now that's my wife. That's my wife's family. Well, I was doing some research for something else, and I remembered my grand uncle in Canada kept insisting that we were Acadian. And a friend of mine who was an expert in Acadian genealogy kept saying, "Ron, no, no, no." And I said, okay. Well, for the longest time, I knew that Fortier High School in New Orleans was named after Dr. Alcee Fortier. I never realized that he's the one that got the Brer Rabbit stories directly from the Africans coming off the boat.
Wow.
He was interested in African culture. I don't know what kind of a man he was. I just know that. Now the other guy took that information, that research, and he created Song of the South. Okay. So I said, if there's 140 down there, what's the chances, right? Then I said to myself, oh my God, what's the chances that this gets worse? So I Googled Fortier Plantation, and I nearly fell off my chair because there it was, St. Charles County, Louisiana.
Wow.
And the house is still there. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. So I started looking a little closer, and then I nearly vomited. There was and I've got to remember his name. The most successful slave revolt or rebellion ever was in Haiti. And the man that led it was punished by being sent to Louisiana because they thought that was the butthole of the world at the time. And how this man did it, because there's a whole backstory to it. How he, in fact, they're making a movie about it. How he was able to get 500 slaves on other plantations to come together. They started marching up the coast, the German coast, along the Mississippi River, and they were doing what they could. They were done. I mean, they were going to get their freedom, and they were going to get it by force. Well, when they got to the Fortier plantation, the militia was waiting, and that was the end of that revolt. And they beheaded 28 of the leaders, and they put their heads on pikes along the Mississippi River.
So.
I did research. They are family. They came over. My family came over in 1654 from Normandy. The family name was Fortier. These people came over about 90 years later. They are related. I don't know where it goes together. I've asked my sister-in-law to try to do a little bit of research on it. But regardless, it's. I was talking to an historian, a podcast that hasn't been released yet, and she said, "Whatever you do, don't do it with the white man's gaze." I said, "I'm not going to do it that way. Yeah. I'm not going to do it that way." Yeah. So that's that. Now I got my little brother who was at 9/11.
God.
Yeah, he was in a black operations unit for the U.S. Coast Guard. For people like, what the heck is that? This is a very, very elite group of people. They became absorbed in the Department of Homeland Security. And he always had his official duty and his unofficial duty. His unofficial duty was the official duty, and vice versa, because that's what they had to do. He was responsible, the unofficial official duty. He was responsible for the piles. After they went into New York and tried to figure out what the hell was going on, now they had to do the cleanup. And he was responsible for the piles. And I remember asking him, "Jim, what piles?" "Plane parts, building parts, body parts, and I can't get them messed up because of the forensics."
Wow.
It's been 20 years.
It's a powerful.
My little brother.
Have to be a
My
child.
little brother.
Take your stories and turning into
Yeah.
amazing pieces of art.
Well, a
Yeah.
visual depiction.
Visual depiction.
You know, because sometimes it's one thing to hear about it, and it's one thing unless you are a visual type storyteller.
Right.
That, you know, gives a lot of imagery, but a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
You
I mean,
know?
I've seen some of Harold Neal's work. You know, he's all over the place now.
Mhm.
You know, and I see the power in his work.
Mhm.
And I really don't quite understand. People are more expressive, responsive, moved. I don't know if I'm successful or not.
You are.
Oh, you're very.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm not fishing for compliments.
No,
It's just I really don't know if if I'm significant. And yet, when my friend Steve Remick and he's well, a landscape painter primarily, but during the pandemic, he started noticing these nurses doing posts online, and the Italian nurse, I think, was the first one, and I mean, it was horrible. These women have, like, you know, their faces are scarred from tape marks, and you know, and then he started saying, "I wonder what these women were like before the pandemic." And he says, these you know, these attractive, intelligent young women, you know, they're nurses, and they're going to go out discoing over here, and they're at the beach over here, and they're with their family over here. And now you're seeing this woman who looks like she's seen, you know, the bottom of the earth. And so he did a series of work of what he calls the COVID healthcare workers.
Really? That's interesting.
So a curator, Joe Law, from the Dartmouth Cultural Center, put us together, and Steve and I met, and it's like, okay, how are we going to make this thing work? And we figured it out. We called the show Reckoning, and he was showing crap that goes on in the world now that we have to deal with, and it's almost impossible to deal with, but it touches nearly everybody. And then juxtaposed to my stuff of things that went on in the world that really still is going on in the world. And, you know, that's how we presented it. And we were kind of stunned because we had the gallery sit a couple of times, and we had people in tears, sobbing. I mean, sobbing. And we're looking at each other like we don't know what we're supposed to do at this point. I had one woman in particular touch my painting and run out of the building because she was going to vomit. Wow. And yeah, I don't know. I still don't know. My job is just to make the stuff right now.
You know, you don't realize a great point. I don't think
I
want to,
because we got to wrap it.
Right, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think that's a great note. So we'll have to have you back. But real quick, if you can tell us, where can everybody reach you?
They can get me at ronfortier.net. That's the easiest way. That's my website, and it also has my my sales site there. I have prints and original paintings for sale. I have the Greenwood series, the Charity Ann series, and I have the Arctic Whaling series on there. And then I also have my abstract work that I did previously that's in there as well.
Okay.
So ronfortier.net.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your depictions and your hard work. And I can't wait to see what's next and what else comes from you.
Right. We'll have to have you on. We would love to continue this.
All right, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, that's Mr. Ron Fortier. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for joining us.
Bye, Ron.
Bye-bye.
Everybody, thank you for tuning in to Get Down and Dirty Talking Art on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. No, sorry, go ahead.
We're done. All right. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye. I was about to get my purse.